Stay positive and persistent at Game Devs. Tony Chan here, and welcome to episode 72 of Game Dev Loadout, where I chat with the best people in our industry every Wednesday morning. If you need motivation and tactics for making a successful gaming career, then this is the podcast for you. Now let's chat with today's future guest, Roberto Alvarez. Rob, it is a game time. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Yes. He studies a gamification design for a learning experience at the IE Business School, which is a graduate school over at Spain. He also hosts a podcast called Professor Games, a weekly show where he interviews successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking. So go ahead, Rob, give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
Well, thank you very much. As you said, I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create engaging and interactive learning materials. That's one of the main things I do, and that's where I started, actually, where I met gamification. If we go back to gaming, I would say I started when I was 7 years old with my Nintendo, now Nintendo Classic, and I was reading the Nintendo magazine. So that was probably where I started, formally. But in IE Business School, where we create these materials, I understood that there was this term starting to go around. And it's about gamification, and it's using the learnings that we've had in video games for tens of years, but in games in general for hundreds and thousands of years into other areas. So the area I like to apply it to the most, and it's where my area of expertise is basically on, is around education, especially higher education. A bit more about my personal life. I live in Madrid in Spain with my wife. We've been living here for the past 4 years, and we're very, very happy to be here. I came from Venezuela, which, well, I don't want to get into any political talking here, so let's just skip to the next question.
Awesome. So break it down for us. Gamification, give specific details of how it works, what it is, what can it do for us?
So gamification is basically the use of game strategies, game design, and all the learnings that we can take from games and game design in general into any other area. So if you can use it in marketing, for instance, you can say, well, what can I learn from games and game design? What do game mechanics and game strategies and all these things, what can they teach me? And so that I can use to engage people in any other area, say marketing, for example. So you say, oh, well, take the loyalty programs of the traditional loyalty programs of any airlines, that they give you points, and those points get you rewards. I mean, that's the most basic way of applying gamification, and it's actually been going on before we called it gamification. So that's basically what gamification has to offer. In education, there's many things that we can do, and one of the things that we're striving to change, the people who are, I guess, at the forefront in education, is to change the way that we grade people, and the whole certification system and all these things, because there's many things that go wrong with that, and you don't really know how people have learned. You don't know how that knowledge sticks, how they can apply that knowledge, and that's where things like gamification can come in, where you can have more applicable knowledge, you can have something that's a lot more experiential, and that's where you can see that the end objective is a lot more clear, especially for the students. I mean, I don't know if you in any class you were sitting there. I'm sure you had that experience at some of the classes. For some people, it's math. For some people, it might be arts or whatever. And you're sitting there and saying, what the hell am I studying this for? I can't understand why the heck this is here in my educational profile. I really want to understand what it's for. And you never did. You even though at some point you probably used all those learnings, you can't understand. So giving that's one of the game mechanics according to Yukai Chao, which is the epic meaning and calling. So whatever you're doing, give it some meaning, give it something that's special and makes it important for you, for your application, for your life, or how you can help using that stuff to help some other people or to help change the world through your experience. So those are small shifts and small changes that could be implemented in education, which could make it a lot more meaningful for the students. Because I'm sure most people have the experience at some point that they were saying, well, even in the university, why the heck am I studying this? What's this useful for? Why am I here? So that's one of the things that we would love to change about education.
Exactly. Honestly, education for me was extremely boring, but I think if they had some kind of way to gamify it, I'm pretty sure it would have been more engaging and more fun for me to be a part of it. And it's interesting that you noted that the gamification word it's been going on, but it's finally trending. Why is that word trending now?
Actually, I would say that the peak of the trend passed maybe 2 years ago, and that was when it was a buzzword, and everybody said, and you say, "Oh, I'm implementing gamification, so I'm so cool." That time for good and for evil, both, has already, I think, passed a bit. And the good thing is that there's no longer people just saying, "Oh, I'm doing gamification because I'm applying points and badges and leaderboards," without thinking about them, and because that's a bad thing. That's what can give gamification a bad credibility, bad reputation. So those people, for good, are not no longer there. So the ones that are sticking with gamification and still implementing and using the term, some people are. The other good thing is that it's also getting combined with other things. So it's not just you do gamification. Some people are starting to talk as well, including the part of the user experience. They're starting to talk about the interfaces, and there's many things as well going on, so that it goes a bit deeper, and that's very good. The bad thing, of course, is that no longer just saying, "Oh, I'm doing gamification," is super cool, and you get paid probably a lot of money just for saying you implemented gamification as a consultant. But again, I mean, the peak is past. The good thing is that if we manage as part of the industry to keep it up, it's going to be there for the long run, I'm sure. Even if the name of the term might change, which is something that I'm not personally close to, but I do think that there's many things that we can, using it as it is right now, coming from games, is a very useful term, because all the psychology behind games and all the things that we've learned throughout all of these, such a successful industry right now, is amazing.
Wow, there's like so much to it. So what is something we probably don't know about in gamification that we should?
I'd say, and this is applicable to gamification and games as well, that I would say that random game mechanics don't necessarily make a game fun, engaging, or successful. You can, and the easiest way to see this, if once you realize it, is when you see that two games, maybe one is almost the copy of another one. They're very similar. Like the mechanics are the same. The graphics of maybe the one that's not successful have stunning graphics, but just the random application of any game mechanic is not something that's going to make a good game or a successful or a fun game. So the thoughtful design of a game and really thinking about how to engage your learners, who are your learners, what are your game mechanics, why are they there, how do you want to make your players feel? When you really think about that, your chances of succeeding in your game are exponentially higher. So basically, I would say that thinking like thoroughly why you want to put something there is very important. And in gamification, this is even more clear, because normally you take a process or a situation that's already going on and you say, "Oh, let's going to gamify this." And some people will say, "Oh, let's put some points here, give them some badges for every time they click here, and have a leaderboard over there." That's not engaging. That's not fun. People don't care about having a badge that says you clicked here 10 times. That's the truth. I mean, badges. If you're going to give out badges, they have to be meaningful. You have to say, well, you like, just like in any game, if they start giving you badges and things all the time, they stop being. I mean, you kind of get used to it and into the over justification effect, I would call it. That we've. I don't know if you've heard about that one. It's when you get something and at some point you say, well, it's kind of. I deserve it more than it's a reward. So at that point, you don't care when you're receiving it, but you actually get angry when you stop receiving it. So I would say that that's very important. Like, be very thoughtful of why you're doing each of the design parts that you're doing there. What's your, as Amy Jo Kim would like to call it, the core loop of fun that you have in your game? What will keep people coming back? And once you have that design and well thought, you can then start thinking about the other things. But don't just say, well, let's have a game. And, I'm going to stick here a bit of, I don't know, I really enjoyed playing FIFA, the football game. So let's put teams. And, well, I also like, Star Wars and, I like this lightsaber. So let's have teams and lightsabers. And, that's going to make the game amazing. It's not. I mean, if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't have a good story, if it doesn't have something interesting to attach it to it, it's hardly going to have any success. And that's also true. I mean, I'm sure that most of the games never make it to any success.
Definitely. And that's why you got to study and research. And that's the part that I'm curious about. How do you do testing to figure out if that gamification works or is fun? Like, how do people test that?
There's many theories around that. There's many people who have different views. As I was mentioning, Amy Jo Kim, she's very adamant on. She's also from the startup world, And she's very adamant on testing very early on. So I do agree very much with that. If you have the opportunity or at least you can try to force the opportunity of testing your assumptions, as startups like to talk about. And you say, well, what's your game going to be about? Well, it's going to be about this, this, and that. And maybe do a small thing, even if it's in paper, and test it with somebody who could be in your audience and get some feedback. Then they'll tell you something and say, and then you'll realize, but here I could also include these and that. And then go to the next iteration and say, well, maybe develop it a bit more. Once again, it can be in paper, or you can start developing something on the computer already and show it to someone and test it there and see what's working, what's not working. Maybe the whole concept doesn't make sense and you have to go on to the next concept. And that's something that can happen. And so again, Amy always mentions something like, don't fall in love with an idea, with your idea, rather fall in love with the problem you want to solve from people, or in the case of game development, what you want to make people have fun with. So that's probably the what you want to fall in love with, not exactly a single concept and saying, I'm going to make a game about getting back to the Star Wars about Wookiees. I mean, fall in love with maybe, some idea that you have and that you want to develop that has a bit more of a general touch, and then start testing out small things. And of course, as that grows, you'll get, and that's another good thing. You'll get early adopters very, very early on, and people who might be excited about how the game is evolving over time, and you'll get a lot of feedback from them. So I would say always keep on testing, especially once again, you probably want to break your game into 4 or 3 phases depending on who you're following in that theory. But there's always you have to find a way to get people to know your game, of course, and that's fundamental. You could call that discovery, for example. Then you have to get an introduction to people, so the onboarding to the game. And then Amy likes to call this one the core loop, where it's like the center of the game, what keeps people coming back week after week or day after day. And then you have the end game, or when the master's time, when you master actually the game. So maybe starting by the core loop, which is the main thing that will keep people coming. Once you have that really figured out, you can start thinking about onboarding and about getting people from the market inside. But I would say that's the fundamental thing that you have to think of and that you have to test out the most.
Oh man, see, that's iteration. You got to keep testing it out. Aside from adding like random mechanics, like you mentioned earlier, what mistakes are most common, even at a pro level?
I would say to forget about what your objective is, especially in gamification. When people when you include gamification into the design, you're thinking about getting something. It's not saying, again, when it was a trendy, like super trendy word, people were doing gamification as the objective. Like, I'm going to do gamification. That's my objective. And that's not an objective. Your objective could be, I want to get more people to my website, or I want to get more sales, or I want to get people more engaged. And then you have to say, well, what does engaged mean? Get people to come back to the site instead of once a week, once a day. I mean, that kind of thing, you have to think very thoroughly what your main objective is. You might have 1 or 2 other secondary objectives, but you have to see the main one, and that's what every action that you take has to help you build towards that objective. Maybe not directly, but even if it's indirectly, you have to see a path where whatever you're including, whatever you're introducing, is helping your player feel some way so that you can achieve your business objective or your fun objective or your learning objective. That's fundamental. I mean, the mistake I see the most, and that happens like very frequently, is you forget about what you're doing all the way. Like just get excited about random stuff and the shiny object syndrome. Yeah. And you forget about what your main objective is.
Yeah, do not forget your one thing, what makes you want to stand out. Overall, what are your key principles for a better gamification that's like effective, that brings in the best results?
Again, I would get back to being very thoughtful of what you want to achieve. If you define very well your objectives, and through your objectives, you then start building your game mechanics, you start building your gaming strategies, your game dynamics, etc. If you start from that place, everything you build is around that, that's a great practice that can help you build something amazing. And I'm sure that applies exactly the same way to game design or game development. You have to think something very thoroughly, not just something random. Maybe you have a very good instinct and the first thought that comes to your mind is very good. But always, again, test it out. Make sure that it's coming around for something, and that you're not just going to introduce something random for the sake of introducing something random. And even if it's an Easter egg, the Easter egg has an objective in itself, and it's getting the people engaged, and you want to have it there so that people who are exploring around, they find this and they say, oh, this game is so exciting, let me keep on looking and I'll explore the game more. So that kind of thing, when you include something, I do think it's fundamental to keep in mind why you're creating these things for.
Love that. Now, let's take this on a more personal level, and you've been doing this for a while. What was the worst moment of your career, that one moment that's still vivid in your mind? Be very detailed and tell us that personal story.
I'm going to be as detailed as I can. As you know, I work for another company, so I work for a business school. So it wasn't one of the projects that I worked for there. The way that we work is we have an academic person who's in charge of the content. So anything that we're going to say there, of course, has to be validated, has to be very strict in that sense, so that we don't say something. I mean, we're making a marketing material, we don't say something stupid. So that's great. But the thing is, of course, one of these materials which I was creating got some very interesting and good feedback, but it was a lot of feedback because there were things that I didn't completely get. So I don't want to get too much detail so that the professors won't feel bad about. In the end, it was a good success, and it's still being used. But I don't want anybody to feel bad about it if they listen to this interview. So the thing is, I created this interactive material, and after, giving it a lot of thought, I thought I had, everything covered. I thought there was sufficient feedback everywhere. We had all these mechanics, all these things that were very interesting for people to learn. We had the objectives, the learning objectives very clear. And then I go up to my boss and show him the whole material. It was basically complete. I give them a presentation. They go through the material by themselves, etc. And they tell me, look, I think you've done some great things, but here's a list of things that you probably had to go through. And it was eye-opening. I mean, at the start, of course, it was a shock, and in the most negative way. I saw these things and I said, wow, I mean, I really screwed up. I mean, there's many things that I didn't do. Of course, it was one of my first projects, and it was one of the first times I was introducing gamification into these projects. But I had a lot of feedback, and I felt like at the moment I felt crushed. I mean, it was like my small baby. I had worked on it a lot. I had worked with our team of developers. I had worked with our audiovisual team. I had done many other things. I did them myself, and I was crushed. I mean, I felt like my work wasn't good enough. The good thing is I had a very good boss back then, and he's my boss again right now. He was very understanding, and he, like, in the end, at the next meeting that we had, he did explain, like, it's not that it's bad, it's all these things that you have to consider. Of course, it's one of your first projects, so I was very encouraged by him later. But at the moment, I mean, I literally felt crushed that there were so many things. But of course, looking back, I would say I learned that, of course, I mean, I was getting started. I didn't have all the answers. I for sure I still don't. And there were many things that escaped me. So I would say that there's many things to learn for me from that. That one of them is having a support team or your boss or whomever that can see through your things and can check what you're doing is fundamental. I mean, somebody else who has maybe more expertise than you do helping you out, even if just checking what you do and going through it can provide like super, super, super important feedback and very valuable. So that's one of the main things I learned there. And the other one is that you don't have all the answers, for sure.
And this is why it's always important to ask questions. You just got to ask questions. And what could you have done to prevent that? Like you said that you missed a lot of things, or you should have done a lot of things. As game does, we're probably faced with the same situation where we're working on a big project, and we're working on this one thing that we figured to do other things. Like, what can we do to prevent that?
I would say fail fast and often, like the startup people say. And why? Because from failures, you can learn a lot of things. And I think that completely avoiding failure has two bad things. And I suffered from that because I do have to say I was very successful at school. I was very successful at getting my first job. I got offers. I mean, I'm very happy and I'm very blessed in the sense that I would have been very, very successful. And getting that negative feedback for the first time is very, it's very discouraging. And you maybe feel like, well, all the things that you've been doing great, maybe this time it's not my thing. And it was certainly not the case. That was maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago that that I got that feedback. And here I am. I'm still doing the same thing. I'm actually very happy. I'm going to be speaking at a conference about this in a couple of weeks. I mean, I can't complain about how it's been for me. But having that only success and no failure, and I didn't find like these places of having very strong negative feedback, I didn't learn that much from those experiences. So I do think that getting that fail, and which is not, I mean, the main thing about failure is that it's not final. I think that I'm from Latin America, but I think that we share that with the States from the American culture. That like failure feels like, oh, you're now a loser and now you're labeled as a loser. That's certainly not the case. I mean, maybe that looks like that a bit in school and we get labeled and that kind of stuff, but that goes off fast. I know some people may have suffered from that in school. I wasn't the popular guy, but I was maybe a bit more of the geek who got good grades. And you get many labels, but that's not the way life works. So I would say that that's a very fundamental thing, to test out things. And when you fail, what I would say that is very important, it's only final, and it's only really bad if you learn nothing from it. If you don't realize where the mistakes on your end. Because if you start blaming just other people and why they didn't help you and why they were so mean and why they were blah, 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 that's where you're not learning. You have to look inwards and say, well, what did I do to put myself in here?
That was deep, Rob. that was really deep. And you're absolutely right. Like, you can't be blaming other people. When you fail, take it in, figure out what you did wrong, and what you need to improve, and don't give up. Like, that's a lot of things that game developers do, is they just give up on their project. Me and Rob, we want to encourage you, game devs, to, keep pushing forward, learn from your mistakes. There's a great community online. Just ask questions. You got to ask questions. What are bad recommendations do you hear in your profession?
That's not an easy one, but I would say that some people are, especially in the gamification area, there's more people that don't know what they're doing than people that do know what they're doing. And the ones that don't know what they're doing, they talk very loud. Yeah?
Oh.
So for instance, I got recently these guys from a company I'm not going to name, of course, and they came in and said, oh, we've been researching gamification for the past 20 or 15 years. I can't remember the exact date, but I do know that it was only less than 10 years ago that gamification even started being used as a word. So, I mean, that just didn't make any sense. And they started going around and, you just had here a couple of things, a couple of badges and points and leaderboards, and you had these game mechanics here, and, it's going to make it a lot of fun. And the problem is that's, as I said before, that's absolutely not true. I would say that I would go back to one of my previous answers where actual thoughtful design and thoughtful creation of game mechanics and all these things for games, for gamification, for simulations, for anything that has to be related to these designs. You have to think things through. It's not just you stamp a badge here and people will get excited about the badge. You have to ask yourself, well, if I'm going to add a badge, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm saying is if you're going to add a badge, you have to think about what it means for the people who are going to get that badge. If it's not meaningful, if it's not significant, if they didn't earn it through hard work, they're not going to care about that badge and they're going to forget about it very soon. So that's, I guess the main thing I hear is people saying that there's these magic bullets and you just add this and it's going to be amazing. That's probably the worst recommendation you can hear, and that applies for sure for game design and gamification as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You have to be wary of information out there. There's tons of information out there, but you gotta, I guess, what people hold credibility, which is true. You gotta do the research because there's so much information out there, wrong information. When we're doing gamification, what is the biggest waste of time that we might be doing?
I would say that maybe the biggest waste of time, if you're, especially when you're getting started, is trying to go around a very big project and having it hidden in your cave and working on it in absolute secrecy and nobody else knows about it. So you, of course, if you had in such a big secrecy, you have no testing. You're not checking out with other people, and you're like inside your cave doing something, and that has many risks. Of course, that you're committing many mistakes and nobody's helping you realize them. But also that maybe what you're doing is not even meaningful. It's not even significant. You're not doing, if you're just deep inside your cave thinking by yourself, you're probably not making any player research either. So you're not thinking about who you're going to provide the solution to. And probably you don't have an audience, or there's nobody that fits the profile that you're thinking, or maybe you're not even thinking of a profile of people. You're just doing your thing. So I think that one of the main things there would be not to isolate yourself when you're designing and when you're creating, because whatever you're creating, unless you're creating it for you and only for you, it's going to have an audience. So think about your audience. Try and talk to your audience as much as possible. Try to research your audience. Try to see what other things they're doing. Maybe the game you're designing, you're thinking about a game for dads, like recent dads that have always been gamers, and you want to have them, I don't know, let's say like a casual game that they can play when the kid's sleeping finally, because as you probably know, kids don't sleep at the start. They don't sleep as much. Yep. So I'm sure you're pretty aware. And maybe that's what you want to do. So think about like very deeply about what the needs of those parents are and how the dynamic of their life works, so that you can actually design for them.
Yeah, and that's a big risk if you're isolating yourself and creating this game, because once you complete it and then all of a sudden you release it and no one plays it, you just wasted a lot of time and energy. Yeah. So definitely put that out in the open when you're making a game.
I mean, when it's complete, it's harder to iterate than if you're like getting started and just have a few things.
Yeah. So that's why you just got to go out there and get that user feedback. What have you changed your mind about in the last few years, and why?
I have to say that I loved games all my life. I had to quit on games a bit for a while because it can get to be like the only thing that you're doing if you don't give time for other things. But you get to a certain age in life after you graduate, and you feel like now it's the time for the serious life. And there's nothing wrong about being serious, but and this is something I heard before. But I'm coming to realize it better. It was something my dad told me, is that, I used to do plays in theater plays in high school. And people were kind of surprised when they saw me there, because they thought like, oh, this guy, that he's always like, especially my family, that they thought I was like so serious. And, I wasn't the guy making all the jokes at the parties. And I wasn't that kind of guy. But of course, you're in a theater play, you do your role and you do your thing, and you can be a lot of fun. So they said, oh, but I mean, this guy that's so serious, how come he's doing all these fun things? And my dad said, look, you don't have to be the guy who's always, like drinking or whatever to be a fun guy. I mean, you can be very serious about what you're doing and still be a guy who's filled with fun. And that's touched me recently, like in a deeper level, because it's not that you get to a certain age and you have to be the serious guy who never laughs. That doesn't make you a serious person. It doesn't make you a good person. You can have a lot of fun, and you can have a lot of games and playfulness in your life, as long as the things that you're doing are taken seriously. I mean, you can be a game developer, which can be something with a lot of fun. You can be a guy who dedicates his life to I mean, there's people who live from gaming, literally, and I'm sure they have a lot of fun with that. But what it means is that what you're doing, you have to take it seriously. I mean, you can have fun and be serious at the same time, and that's not a contradiction. So realizing that that's not a contradiction has helped me shift many things in my life, especially around an industry like gamification that spins around. I mean, we do research playing games, literally. So that's not something that you typically would think of in a very serious and traditional world.
Yeah, and it's so cool that gaming has it's like reached another level. And about the Twitch streamers, like the gamers that play Twitch all the time, they're having fun, but it's also a hard job. Like, it's a serious job where they're live streaming like 10 hours a day or something. So
for sure.
you could take things serious and still have fun. But once you put the effort into it, it's definitely worthwhile. And yeah, after school, it's a whole nother story. Like a lot of things are different. And now that you're more experienced, more better, you've been working in the gamification for a while now. What do you think was the best investment you've ever made? It can be investment of money, time, or energy. What was that investment?
I'd say in general, time and energy, it's reading a lot about gamification and the gaming industry and the game designs. I think spending that time to read the people who are the ones who know a lot about this and have been around for a while is very, very useful, because you get to brief the experience that you need to have yourself so that you understand those concepts. through reading books, reading blogs, getting to read all of these people, and then you'll probably get a chance to meet them at some points, and you can talk to them about their work because you've been reading about them, you've been reading about other people, and you can even talk to them about how you feel that their work fits into the work of somebody else and how you've had ideas around that. And there you can gain their trust. And that's been very useful for me, especially as a podcaster, because that way when I look for guests and I get to know them, I can talk about deeper things and just, them spitting back all that they teach and show all the time, and going into deeper conversations and getting something else out of the conversation that they have.
Is there any specific blog or person or talks you want to mention?
I could mention for sure Yukai Chao. He was for 2 or 3 years. He was the gamification guru of the year in the Gamification World Congress that happens here in Spain. I can mention for sure I call him a very good friend, who's Andrei Marchevsky. He has a blog called gamified.co.uk or gamified.uk. I'm not sure. If you just type gamified, and it's a very nice blog. He writes. He's not. You can't count on him writing exactly the same amount of posts each week, but for sure he has at least once a week, sometimes 3, 4, or 5 times a week, and every time he writes, he has a very, very interesting and insightful things. I would say also the talks of Jane McGonigal have been the 2 TED Talks that she has given. One is about I think her most recent book is Super Better, which is how she overcame serious illness using games. I mean, she created a game to get herself better, and she succeeded, and she won, basically. And the other one is called Reality is Broken, and it's precisely about how the reality that we live in and the world as we've designed it as humans is a game, and it's not a well-designed game. So
yeah, I would definitely link those for sure. What was the greatest idea you had to date, like an aha moment?
Oh, Professor Game, for sure. The podcast that I'm doing right now, it's certainly been an aha moment. But the funny thing is, it's been an aha moment that's happened by not in a single spot. Like at some point, I realized that I loved radio, so I had a radio show back home. I think it was around 2011 or 2012. The thing is, I'm not ashamed to say it, but it was a total failure. I mean, I had to literally pay for being on the air because I didn't still have any sponsors. But the radio station was terrible. I mean, the radio station was super old fashioned. They didn't have. I mean, one of the microphones broke, and they didn't get a new one, so we had to make interviews with just one microphone. I mean, it was an experience for me to learn a lot from. I can say I learned a lot from that. But and there's like 2 main things. Back in the day, when it was about radio, you had to have a license to be on the radio. So I had to have a partner that had the license so that we could have a program. And he was very well intentioned and very well meaning. But to be honest, it was a podcast. It was a radio show about entrepreneurship, and the only one in the show who knew about entrepreneurship was me. So I realized that I had to either find someone who was going to be my partner in this thing, who actually was as excited about the topic as I was, or I had to get the certification myself, which I did right after I stopped doing the show. The next very important moment for me, well, actually, that was before, when I was reading the Nintendo magazine back when I was maybe 9 years old. I was all day dreaming. I mean, imagine a life in which what you do, maybe 80% of your time is playing video games, and then you spend the other 20% of your working life writing about the video games you just played with. I mean, it was just like a dream life. So you combine those 2 things and then bring into gamification, which is what I realized while working where I am right now in IE Business School Publishing. And I got those things together, and I realized, look, I mean, I love radio. I love talking to people. I love interviewing and interacting with other people who know more than I do. And I love gamification. I love games. I love education. I brought all these things together, and I said, well, I can make a podcast because nobody else is doing a podcast about education and gamification, and how education can be changed very deeply through the use of these game design techniques. So I said, well, that way I can get to know people who are very interesting to me. I mean, I can do all these things, and that's how Professor Game came by. And I'm super excited. Right now it's This interview is happening around middle of November, and it's around my second week, going to the third week of the podcast, and I'm super, super excited about it.
Yeah, Game Does. You got to check it out if you want to learn more about gamification, and I will link that up in the show notes, so definitely check that out. With the game industry booming every year, what are you most excited about today?
I'm super excited about how every day it's no longer only, because a few years ago, not too long ago, games were starting to get this, we still do, get all these negative things about saying, no, games are inducing people into violence and blah, 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 which I think it's complete rubbish. I don't think it makes any sense. But besides that, the good thing is that now we're also getting a lot of people who are very serious into their research as well, saying how games and the know-how we get from games is influencing other industries, and how we can learn things from games and from the game industry to do good things, and things like games for change and things like gamification in many areas are actually having a positive influence in the world and in people's lives. I'm really excited about how that's helping shape the world right now.
Charity companies like Extra Life, where you play games and people donate, that is an amazing thing, and that's coming from gaming. And so it's crazy that how people are still trying to downplay games as a bad thing when it's bringing a lot of good stuff to the world. And people have donated millions and millions of dollars every year through games, and so I think it will be more positive. Like the media will see it more positive. Like, what do you think about that?
I think that again, we will have to complete the cycle of all that rubbish research or pseudo research that had been done around, violence and how video games are making people violent, or how of course, video games and games in general, like most things in life, if you don't know if they become a serious addiction, they can be something bad for sure. And I agree with that. And just like sex. People who are obsessed with sex, that can be something that is bad for your life, and it's an addiction, and it's not a good thing for you, for your health, for your family, for your surroundings. It's not a good thing. But just like most things in life, something that is taken up too much can be bad. But aside from that research, which shows that something in excess is bad, which I guess they can do it for absolutely anything, there's all this research that's coming up, and all this media attention that's things like games for development, and all these things that are getting, and games that are raising awareness about social problems. I played a game not too long ago about the earthquake that when it happened in Haiti. It was a terrible thing, but you could actually understand a bit more what were all the difficulties that the people were going through. And of course, at the end of the game, if you felt compelled, I think it was made by the Red Cross. I'm not sure if it was the Red Cross or somebody else. You could donate to the cause of helping people in Haiti. So you can really make a difference through these games. There's a game called I've heard it, to be honest, recently. I've heard it in 3 different things, separate, completely unrelated places. It's called Papers, Please. And it's about you're an immigration officer receiving papers and checking papers to let people into that country or not, and all the consequences around that. And I know that anybody who's gone through immigration, any immigration of any country, you feel like it's a very bad thing, and these officers are bad people. But it also helps you understand that these are people as well, and they have their own needs, and they have their own motivations, and that they're not unethical, and then they're not evil, and they're not mean people. That they just have a job, and that's the way they have to do it. And you understand many other things, and you understand also many things of people who are emigrating, and that, it's a very interesting game to understand other people. So I think that games now are every time more getting all this media attention around the good things that we can do as well. And I think we have to help push towards that and make games more meaningful and not just addicting, because there's also the truth that there's many games, and not only games, a lot of software that's being designed to create addiction. There's a very recent and very good, there's this gamification designer called Gabe Zickerman. He's Canadian, but I think he's living in San Francisco. He recently is launching a company. I just forgot the name of the company, but it's precisely about using all these strategies and all these things to end addiction. And it's absolutely amazing. But the thing I wanted to highlight here is about his talk and about talking about all these things. Starting from Facebook to many of the online and mobile games, that they are designed for you to try to become addicted to them. And that's not exactly positive. So that there's many things that are going on to make the industry into a more positive place. And it's complete. I'm very convinced that that's what's the future of the industry is going to look like.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're a part of that, Rob. And sorry, I'm Maya. Like, I just want to put a positive light in games, and it's credible that games could teach us these different things. Like, so I'm curious, what is the one game that influenced you the most, and why?
I'm going to do a little plug in here. It's not. I'm not sure if calling it a game or a simulation would be more appropriate. But we have a simulation at IE Business School that my colleague designed. And it's called 10 Downing Street, and there you as a class, people play as though they were the Prime Minister of the UK during the recession, the recent recession. And it's super fun. I mean, you get information from the news, and then you have to act upon it. You have a few options which you have to decide what to do. It has a decision tree. If you take it as a full-fledged game design, it's not super complex, but it's very, very deep. It has a lot of implications, and it helps you learn many, many things, and it's extremely engaging. I mean, we've had in our internal classes, we've been distributing it as well to other universities and other business schools because of our positioning, our global positioning in the especially in the online world. The IE Business School is very respected in that sense. We've been in many times situated in the first 10 positions in the world. The first one's in Europe, almost every time by the Financial Times. And this is one of the simulations, one of the online interactive materials that we've been pushing through. And I think it's super, super, super exciting.
Ooh, I want to check that out. That sounds really exciting.
Yeah, I can give you a demo at some point if you wish.
Yes. Oh, why do you love being part of the video game industry?
I think that one of the things I like the most of being around games is that playing a game can actually be part of my work. I mean, I can even call it research. I mean, and it can be true. I mean, it's not just saying that it's research. It could be actually research. And there's many people in gamification that actually, I'm included there, that we play games and we're actually not only enjoying the game, which of course you always enjoy the games when you're playing them, but you're also thinking about what are the game mechanics, what was the game designer thinking when he created this, what are interesting things that you can use for your own games or for your own gamification designs, and being able to call playing a video game research is something that I think is pretty awesome.
Oh yeah. That's why there's so many different avenues into the video game industry, and gamification is one. And I honestly think like gamification is, I guess the most positive, because you're getting more people engaged to learn more, to think more, and it's just much more fun. So I really think gamification is a point, and I hope it continues to grow. Awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome. The show isn't over yet, the game does. And before we go into the lightning round, if you enjoyed the episode and want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Overcast. So Rob, I will ask you quick questions, and you'll be giving us a ton of valuable information in return. Are you ready to crush it and release the show?
Oh yeah.
What was holding you back from joining the game industry?
Seriousness, for sure.
Explain a bit about that.
The whole thing about being a serious adult that we were talking about earlier. I mean, I'm sure that was one of the things that was for sure one of the things. The other one is even though I'm a computer engineer, I never went very deeply into programming myself. I've always been more of a project manager and that kind of stuff. So getting into the video game industry as a developer for sure wasn't going to be my thing. And, there was a couple of things, but I think that seriousness was one of the main ones.
What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I always like to have small, achievable commitments. I mean, small things I commit to that I know I can reach, and that makes me get progress through.
And how do you stay committed?
One easy example is having a podcast, which you say you're going to launch every single Monday. You're going to have an episode, and then you have to have an episode every single Monday, no matter what. Is that it's your problem how do you manage? If you promise an episode a week, you have to have an episode a week.
Yeah, once you make that promise to guests, it kind of motivates you to, I got to get this out there.
Absolutely.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Done is better than perfect, for sure.
Oh, I like that. That's huge in the game industry. Done is better than perfect. How has a failure set you up for later success?
I mentioned to you before the radio show about entrepreneurship. I do think that I learned a lot from that, and much of that has taken me to where I am right now in the podcast about Professor Game.
Yeah, remember, game devs, do not give up. Keep pushing forward. What's a great marketing tip to make yourself stand out and to make your game stand out?
Understand your players, your target market, and whatever you do, you're creating it for them. So don't forget that whatever your target market is, that's what you're creating for. And your target market could be somebody like you, even though it's not exactly you. So always think about who that is, who what you're creating, who is it for, so that you can actually make your design and all your stuff specially geared towards that person, and you can cater to their emotions, to their motivations, so that they want to play your game.
What resources should we use to get started today in gamification?
I would say read. There's a lot of books to grow as a great game designer. Some I can name is one of them is A Theory of Fun by Raph Koster. There's The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. I would like to talk about actionable gamification from Yukai Shao. I'm sure that one, that is, even though it's about gamification, you can find it very valuable for game design, because the learnings that Yukai draws from that and all the psychological motivations and what he calls the 8 core drives are useful for any kind of solution, including games.
Gotcha. I will definitely link those up. Now, this next question is a bit of a doozy. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of, and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to join and become successful in the game industry?
Well, I would probably try to get a microphone and I would start podcasting about a topic that I'm very passionate about and that I find that people are interested in. So that would be for sure something I would do.
As long as you're doing something and you have a goal and complete it, you're making progress, that's what counts. Awesome. We have reached the end. Go ahead, Rob, give us a last parting piece of guidance in how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Always that you're designing something, think about why you're designing it, why you're putting that element there, and everything else will fit into its place once you have that very clear, and you always center and everything that you do is centered around that. How you can connect with me? I'm on Twitter, Rob Alvarez B. My last name is super complicated, so that's why I just put the initial letter. That's on Twitter. You can go to professorgame.com, and there you'll find how you can listen to the podcast on either Stitcher or iTunes or even on the web. I have it all over there. And you can email me if you want, professor@professorgame.com. You can drop me an email and ask any questions you want.
Game devs, hit up Rob. He knows a lot about gamification, so go out there and ask him questions. Rob, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and for that, we are truly grateful, and we will catch you in next time.
Thank you. See you around.
Thank you, game devs, for listening, and don't forget that knowledge is only potential, power, execution is the game. Go to GameDevLoadout.com and type in the number 72 in the search bar to find Rob's episode for all the awesome show notes that we just talked about today. Until then, keep on making great games. I'm Tony Chan, and I'll catch you next Wednesday on the Game Dev Loadout podcast. Peace.